The world champion Springboks are going for a 14th win in 16 test matches, but standing in their way is England at Twickenham. In this video, I'll be looking at the squad selections for this test match. We'll also analyse the strengths and weaknesses of the two squads. We'll have a look and see what the respective camps have had to say, and I will give you a little bit of the history between the two teams, as well as make a prediction right at the end of this video. But let's begin by taking a look at the Springbok matchday squad. We'll start with the forwards. Oxenchair, Bongimbonambi and Wilco Louw are the men in the front row. Nice to see Wilco back. That makes him the 50th Springbok to wear the green and gold jersey this year. It's also his first appearance for South Africa since 2021. Eben Etzebeth and Ergier Snyman are our locks. Siya Kolisi, Pieter-Steph du Toit and Jasper Visser complete the back row. Let's move on to the back line now. Grant Williams and Manie Lebok are there. We've also got Kurtley Arendse and Cheslin Colby on the wings. Damien Dialende and Jesse Creel are back as the centre pairing. And Apelele Fassi is the man at fullback. And here comes the bomb squad. Malcolm Marx, Gerard Steenekamp, Vincent Koch, Aldrich Louw and Kwagga Smith. We're going with a 5-3 split this time round. It will be Kobus Reinach, Andre Pollard and Lukhanyo who make up the forward component of that bomb squad. Okay, that's a pretty good looking team if you ask me. It's unsurprising, Rassie Erasmus making 12 changes. We always knew that the team that ran out against Scotland would not be the same that ran out against England. I just didn't think it would be that vastly different. But if you look at who ran out against the Scots at Murrayfield, it's unsurprising, as I say. Let's see what England have decided to do for this match. The front row consists of Ellis Genge, Jamie George, he's their captain, and Will Stewart. Maro Itoje and George Martin are their locks, while we have Chandler Cunningham South, Sam Underhill and Ben Earl as the loose forwards. Let's move on to the back line now. Shall we pronounce this the Afrikaans way? Jack van Poortvliet and Marcus Smith. That will be the English halfback combination. They've also got Ollie Slateholm and Tommy Freeman on the wings. Henry Slade and Ollie Lawrence will make up the centre combination. And Freddie Stewart is back at fullback. Now guys, just before we continue, I want to tell you quickly about my brand new book that is out, and I would love it if you would support me by getting your hands on a copy. It's called How to Become a Sports Journalist. It's available currently on Amazon. That's where you can get it. I will put a link to the book in the description area below. What is this book all about? Well, the title tells you everything, how to become a sports journalist. If you are in high school or a student or maybe even already a working journalist, and you need advice, you need tips, I share all of my experience from 20 years in this business with you in that book. All the secrets, nothing is left out. And the whole idea is to help aspiring journalists and to help current journalists become even better at their crafts. You might say to me, oh, Pete, I'm not your target market. Well, you know what? Maybe you've got a kid, or maybe you've got a nephew or a cousin who is of the age that needs this book. It would make a great Christmas present. Go on and get my book, How to Become a Sports Journalist. Let's have a look at the English replacements. They've also gone with a 5-3 split. Luke Cowan-Dickey, Finn Baxter, Dan Cole. There's your fresh front row. Nick Isiekwe, Alex Dombrant, Harry Randall, he's the scrum half, George Ford, we know all about him, and Tom Roebuck. All right, so now that you have the two matchday squads, let's compare them, starting with the forwards. So if we have a look at what South Africa have decided to go with, Oxenchair, Bongimbonambi and Wilco Louw, that is possibly the strongest scrummaging front row that South Africa can select. In the absence of Frans Malherbe, it's good to see Wilco Louw back. You guys might remember a while back, I asked you before these November test matches who you would most like to see included in the box squad that hasn't actually been involved yet. Cameron Honeycomb's name was the one that popped up the most number of times. Second on that list was actually Wilco Louw. Now they will be scrumming with Eben Etzebeth and Ergier Snyman behind them. I had a look at the statistics, guys. Believe this or not, Snyman and Etzebeth together, that's 250 kilograms. How scary is that? Now, if you look at the English tight five, Ellis Genge, it's a good player. Jamie George, good player. Will Stewart, good player. I do think man for man, our front row is better. But I'm going to tell you something, do not underestimate Genge, George and Stewart. Maro Itoje, world-class player. George Martin, very good scrummager, very good player overall actually for England. But they're coming up against Eben Etzebeth and Adgir Snyman. I'm going to give our locks the edge in that department. Although having said that, it's going to be very interesting to see Etzebeth go up against Itoje. We know that there has been bad blood there in the past. So that's going to be something fun to watch out for. Sio Khaleesi is our captain. Peter Steph du Toit is back at blindside with Jasper Visser, something of a human wrecking ball at 8th man. If you compare that to what England have got going, Chandler Cunningham South, I watched him against Australia last week. I thought he had a great game. He actually scored one of their tries. Very, very impressive player for me, Cunningham South. Sam Underhill, experienced campaigner. And then Ben Earl, a very, very good player as well. Now, if I look at the forwards and if I had to compare them, yes, again, man for man, I think that the Springboks are better. But we're talking about combinations here, and we're talking about on the day kind of stuff. And one thing that we do know is that England do have a good scrum. They do have a good line out. They are going to be competitive at the breakdowns. So let's not underestimate these guys. And I'm going to tell you why as we progress throughout this video. But before we do that, let's take a look and compare the backline players. Starting with the Springboks, it's going to be Grant Williams, who I think is currently our best scrum half. He's with Manie Lebok, and a lot of people are going to be excited about having Manie at fly half. And I think it's fair to say that the other half of people, because Manie does divide opinion at the moment when it comes to Springbok supporters, will be asking, well, who's going to be on kicking duty? Who knows? Maybe it will be Manie. Let me tell you something. This is a fun fact for you. Last time we played at Twickenham against the All Blacks, that was when Manie was also the fly half, he kicked 5 out of 5. So he has a 100% record at Twickenham. Let that sink in. The English have got Jack van Poortvliet and Marcus Smith. I think we're looking at 50-50 here. I'm going to go Grant. In a combined team, I would pick Grant ahead of Jack. And I'll be honest with you, I would pick Marcus ahead of Manie. But that's just me. But I'm saying I can see parity in the halfback area. The difference, of course, is what kind of ball will Smith typically be receiving on the day versus what kind of ball is Manie typically receiving. And we know that Manie is devastating as an attacker, and he's got incredible creativity and flair. And it'll be interesting to see how much effect Marcus will actually have on the game versus what Manie will have on the game. It's just the goal kicking that, again, is something that comes into question, but we'll talk about that later. Let's have a look at what's going on in the centres. Henry Slade and Ollie Lawrence, good players, but they're coming up against the most experienced centre pairing in Springbok history, Damien Dialendi and Jesse Creel. I've got to give it to the Boks in terms of one-on-ones. And on the wings, Ollie Slateholm and Tommy Freeman come up against Kurtley Arendse and Cheslin Colby. Sorry, there's just no ways that I cannot give it to Arendse and Colby. And then Apelele Fassi is coming up against Freddie Stewart. And I'm going to tell you something. I am a big Fassi fan. I really am. I've enjoyed how he's come on in leaps and bounds, quite frankly, in 2024. But as much as I am an admirer of Apelele, I'm going to have to give this one to Freddie Stewart. I think he's a very, very good player. I think England miss something when Stewart is not playing at fullback. And just for that reason, I'm going to give it to Freddie. Okay, so with that being said, let's see what's going on in terms of the people that are coming off the bench in the second half to make a difference. Well, for the Springboks, it's going to be Malcolm Marx, Gerard Stedekamp and Vincent Koch. That is formidable if you are Luke Cowan-Dickie, Finn Baxter and Dan Cole looking from the other side of the field and thinking, oh boy, we're going to be scrumming against these guys later. Sorry, there's just no ways that Cowan-Dickie, Baxter and Cole are superior to Mark Steenekamp and Koch. It just cannot be the case, okay? Alrich Lowe and Kwagga Smith. Kwagga's the best player in the world coming off the bench, so it doesn't really matter who England have. As it turns out, they've got Isiekwe and Dombrandt. I'm going to have to give it again to us. Our 5 that are coming on are better than their 5. I mean, you look at that. I mean, Cowan-Dickie and Cole, just to go back into the front row, yes, they're experienced campaigners. Yes, they are good players. They really are. But man for man, you would pick the Springbok players, right? And then what have we got coming off the bench? Like we said, 5-3 split on both sides. Kobus Reinach and Handré Pollard. Well, if you compare that to Harry Randall and George Ford, that's very, very interesting, because I think that George Ford is a very, very good player. And you could say that he's unlucky not to be included in the England starting 15. Ford is the kind of player who got a lot of stick a couple of weeks ago when he came off the bench to replace Smith, and then he missed that penalty against the All Blacks, which cost England the game. Nevertheless, this is what Steve Borthwick thinks is best. Tom Roebuck is the other player that completes their bench, whereas we have Lukhanyo. There's no ways that you would say that Roebuck is better than Having said all of that, I'm just talking on paper here, and we know that the match is not played on paper. And this is where I want to issue some caution. By every metric, South Africa are the favourites to beat England on Saturday. No doubt about that. The Springboks are superior in almost every area. The Springboks are better than almost every Englishman man for man. But there's a few things that I want to throw at you here. England should have beaten Australia last week. England should have beaten the All Blacks the week before that. In July, England should have at least beaten the All Blacks in the first test, and they probably should have won the second test against the Kiwis as well. As it turns out, they've now lost 4 close games in a row, and you could say that at least they should have won 3 of those 4. So they will be wanting to prove a point, and what better opposition to prove that point against than the world champions? The very same world champions that England lost to by just 1 point in the Rugby World Cup semi-final just over a year ago. Remember, they were leading in that one as well for the majority of the match until right at the end when Pollard kicked that penalty. We were 15-13 down. I think we were 15-6 down, as memory recalls. It was Snyman who scored the try, and then Pollard obviously with that late penalty to put us 16-15 in front. This is a good team who, it seems to me, doesn't quite yet know how to get over the line against the very best teams. And the danger, of course, for South Africa is that it is going to happen at some stage. We, of course, hope that it isn't going to be at Twickenham on Saturday that represents that some stage. Let's see what the respective parties have had to say, starting with Dr. Rassie Erasmus. England, a completely different challenge to Scotland, and we selected our squad based on what we would like to do in the match and also what we think will be best to counter the challenge. Wise words there from Doc. Having said all of that, let's see what their captain Jamie George had to say. We're still hurting from that game, of course we are. He's talking about the World Cup meeting last year in France. Big games like that you have huge regrets from if you don't win. And you know, England, we were so close. We ran them close. I think we saw a little bit of a blueprint of what works against them. But at the same time, we also needed to make sure we closed out the game. Jamie George is quite right that they didn't quite close out that game. And as I say, at some point, England are going to get over the line against one of the top teams in the world. It's also interesting that he references how much they are still hurting from that World Cup semi-final defeat. So there's lots of motivation there to get England going and get them up for this match. And that is why I say we need to be careful. Also, I've had a quick look at the weather prediction, and I know that weather can change very quickly, but there is some rain predicted for Saturday in the Twickenham area. And if that's going to happen, and you factor in the motivation that these guys have got, and you factor in what Jamie George said there about thinking that they've got the blueprint for how to come up against us. What is that blueprint? Well, it's pretty much exactly what you saw the Springboks do at the 2019 Rugby World Cup. Forward-dominated game, keep it tight up front, lots of box kicks from the scrum half, lots of challenging balls in the air. That, I think, is what we're going to see a lot of from the English. It's a really, really good tactic when you feel that the other team is superior to you, and I say that in very loose terms, but when you feel that you're coming up against extremely strong opposition, maybe that's a better way to put it, the box kicks, the forward-dominated game, it's a great leveler, I think, and we saw that in Japan in 2019, how the Springboks used that tactic to perfection throw in the bomb squad as well, and that's how we won that World Cup in Japan. Can England do the same thing? It remains to be seen. Let's have a look at the history between these two teams. Over the years, South Africa and England have played each other 46 times. The Springboks have dominated the rivalry with 28 victories, England only with 16, and there have also been 2 draws. How about at Twickenham? Well, it's been much closer, as you can imagine. In 23 matches at the famous old ground, the Boks lead the head-to-head 12-11. And here's a look at the last 5 meetings between the two teams. Starting with a Twickenham match, as it turns out, 12-11 to England. That was in 2018. That was also the Owen Farrell horror tackle on Andre Esterhuizen test match. You might remember that. We didn't even get a penalty for that. So it could easily then have been 14-12 to South Africa. That's on the assumption that we received a penalty and we actually kicked it over. There's no guarantees, of course, as we know. Then that beautiful 32-12 Rugby World Cup final victory over the Poms in Yokohama. Beautiful stuff that was. Then England edged us 27-26 at Twickenham in 2021. That was a last-minute kick from George Ford, if I remember correctly. There was also a 27-13 win for the Springboks the last time the two teams played each other at Twickenham. And then, of course, that 16-15 arm wrestle at the Rugby World Cup last year. Okay, here's a fun fact for you. Over the years, the Springboks have played 99 test matches on British and Irish soil. So if you include Dublin and Belfast, we have played 99 tests on those 2 islands, and we're about to play our 100th. That is going to be against England at Twickenham on Saturday. So that's something to look forward to, actually. The Springboks have also scored 47 tries over the years at Twickenham. 3 more, and we will be up to 50. And just before I give you my prediction, just a few more thoughts on what is going on here. So I'd like to repeat a few things. England have got a good scrum. They've got a good line out. They're going to be competitive at the breakdown. I think we can expect from the English a tight game up front. You heard Jamie George there talking about them thinking that they've found the blueprint on how to play against us. They're going to keep it tight up front. I think we're going to see lots of box kicks. I think it's going to be close. For at least for a while before the Springboks eventually pull away when the bomb squad comes up. I think anybody thinking that it's going to be something like 42-6 like we saw in 2008, I don't think you're going to see that. I even think that something like 27-13 that we saw last time, even that might be just a little bit too much of a score. Factor in the expected weather conditions, factor in the English motivation after 4 close defeats in a row, 2 of those being in the last fortnight, as well as last year's Rugby World Cup semi-final. And I really believe that this team, a good team, is going to be fully up for the challenge, and they are going to come at us with everything that they've got. And that is why my score prediction is going to be South Africa 23, England 15. So what do you think? Do you think that will be the score? It might be closer, it might be different, might be a big win. Maybe England are going to win this one. Let me know in the comment section down below. And while you're down there, you might want to consider a super thanks comment. What is that? You might see down there below, there's a button. It looks like a heart with a $ inside of it. I'd encourage you to click on that. It will allow you to make a highlighted comment, and I promise to hit the heart button on your comment and also reply to it. It will also give you the opportunity to make a small donation to my channel, any amount that you are comfortable with. Why am I asking you to do that? Well, I'd like to go to the Rugby World Cup in 2027 and give you daily coverage from down under, but I'm going to need a little bit of assistance to make that happen. So if you've enjoyed this video and you'd like to contribute in that manner, please go ahead and do so. I would be very, very grateful if you did that indeed. If you're not yet ready to do that, something else you can do to help me out is to just hit the like button. You may as well crock roll the like button. You can also subscribe to the channel if you haven't already done so. Now, just before you go, let me tell you that I've interviewed 90 Springboks on this channel. all about their careers. And one of the Springboks who was involved in that 42-6 victory in 2008 was Ruan Pienaar. You can go and watch that exclusive interview with him. It's appearing on your screen right over here. And let's just talk about the other side of the coin. In 2002, we lost 53-3. Corne Krige was our captain that day. He talks about that occasion, as well as Kamp Staldraad and everything else that happened in his Bok career in this video over here. I will see you next time.